So that was and they can move around.
They do or don't. They do. Stay.
Good evening. Does this work in the room? Can you folks hear me with this? And you're good there, Robert? Welcome. Thanks so much for coming tonight. It's about 20 to 7. This will run till 8:30, unless we're done before then. But it won't run beyond 8:30 as a formal meeting. At 8:30, we'll adjourn, and then if any of you want to have continued conversation, one-on-one conversations or whatnot with Aaron or me, we'll stick around. But the meeting itself, we're starting now, will definitely end at 8:30, if not before. Welcome. This is, as advertised, this is the beginning of a rezoning process that we want to undertake for our waterfront along the Beverly Harbor. Just to give you folks a couple of thoughts in terms of what we're thinking. We have, as you know, recently made application to the state to have our designated port area de-designated or removed. And the designated port area is a section of our harbor front that starts, and Aaron will show you this in his PowerPoint. It starts over by Silver Court. It includes several houses on Silver Court, and it wraps around the corner, Jubilee Yacht Club, Tuck Point Condos, and down through the several properties between there and the city's property at the old McDonald's restaurant. So it stops, it includes, but stops at the city's property at McDonald's. It actually includes the city's recreational boating docks, but not the city's commercial docks. And it doesn't include anything beyond that. So we've applied to have our DPA eliminated. We'll get an answer from the state on that by next spring. They described it as about a 9 to 12 month process. So in conjunction with that, we're hoping for some relief, if not a total de-designation. In conjunction with that, we need to do a rezoning of our waterfront so that we can direct the way we want to see our waterfront developed in the future. A couple of thoughts that I want to share with you. High priorities or values that we are bringing to this are to respect the adjacent neighborhoods with everything we do, to protect, preserve, and hopefully improve access to the waterfront for people who want to fish off the docks and piers and for all of our commercial fishermen. So I know some of you are here, and we want to have that conversation. Later this evening, we'll be getting into smaller breakout groups and asking you for some input. And one of those will be to make sure that we don't miss any what you call stakeholder groups for follow-up meetings. So that, we'll have that conversation later in the evening. But again, the adjacent neighborhoods, you people who make your living down on and along our waterfront, want to make sure that you are comfortable with and that you always have a place there. Improving public access overall. The DPA really prevents public access. Getting rid of the DPA gives us much more opportunity to get the public down along the waterfront, to develop a walkway, to bring in, and these are some of the things, some of our goals in rezoning, and you elected me, but you folks all have a voice, so this rezoning process, is our collective effort. The kind of development that I think, or that we're looking to promote, or we're putting up on the table for discussion here, are things that will really bring the public down to the waterfront, things that people want to see down at the waterfront. People want to come down to the waterfront and fish and see other people fish. They want to come down to the waterfront, and if it's me who doesn't lobster, I want to see you folks going in and out. I want to see you bringing in your catch. I want to see you thriving. And there's that vitality to a waterfront that everybody wants. And we also want to come down to our waterfront and get an ice cream, or get some fried clams, or sit out and have a drink and a bite to eat. So the type of things that a rezoning could allow are the things that that we'll be discussing. It may be first floor retail and hospitality like restaurants. It may be second and third floor condos if residential seems to be a fit with that. So those are the things that we'll be talking about as we go through this. And also, on the water side of our waterfront, we hopefully will have the opportunity for more boat slips than we currently have. And then when you look at our waterfront as a part of our downtown as a whole, we have a great opportunity now or in the coming years to take our depot, or Beverly Depot train station, and the transit-oriented development that is happening around there and along Rantoul Street, connect that to a more thriving waterfront, and connect it all back up Cabot Street to what's kind of been the traditional retail downtown, retail and service downtown that we've had over the years. So there's a lot of opportunity to connect. Here now, tonight, and going forward with this process, it'll be specifically about what we do along that stretch of our harbor. Okay? So that's just to frame it for you. Aaron Clausen is our Director of Planning and Development, and he will take over the microphone now. Aaron is going to make a presentation to you that will take about 30 to 35 minutes. I will give him a time check at 25 minutes, and we'll get him. But it's a very important presentation. He walked me through it earlier. I think it will answer some questions, and it'll get us kind of primed for the conversation. If you have questions for Aaron as his presentation is being made, please jot them down. Okay? There'll be no questions during his presentation, but we'll have some time for clarifying Q&A after he's done before we go to the next part of the meeting. Everybody good? Okay. Again, thank you so much for being here. Aaron Clausen.
So thank you, Mayor. I don't know if it was obvious there, but apparently I can ramble on a little bit when we do presentations, so I've been given the 25-minute rule. So the first thing I'd like to say is thank you to everybody who's made it here tonight. I really appreciate that you all have lives and busy schedules, and I appreciate that you're taking the time to join us and have a conversation about the Harborfront and figuring out what are the next steps forward and what's the vision for our Harborfront collectively for a community so that we can all benefit from it and maximize the amenities that we have on the Harborfront. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Aaron, before you get going, I promised BevCam. Would you just say that they're both broadcasting live and streaming live right now? Okay, thank you. Yes, so BevCam has pointed out we are live, streaming on TV, but also streaming on the web. This presentation will be available on the webpage at a later date as well. So if you want to go to bevcam.org, thank you, and check it out at a later date, or if you have friends or family that couldn't make it tonight, please join us at that time. So for tonight's agenda, I just go through this relatively quickly. The first thing I want to hit and talk about is why are we here? Why are we having this conversation right now? Then talk about the planning processes that are happening. The mayor mentioned the designated port area, so we'll talk about that process in a little bit of detail, but we'll also talk about the planning process around a comprehensive rezoning that we would like to propose to the City Council in the coming year. And I really want to spend a little time on that so that everybody in here understands what that process means and how your involvement will really figure into the final product or the final regulations that will help implement the vision going forward. And then I'm going to talk a little about the site itself, the area of interest, try to kind of start building the vision a little bit. The mayor talked a little about our kind of the principles or our goals moving into the zoning amendment. But I want to tee that a little up so when we have a breakout session, we all can have a conversation around some themes along the waterfront, talking about land uses, talking about recreation, access, and in the hopes of developing a vision or an idea so that it will guide the development, ultimately, of a new zoning code or new zoning regulation for the waterfront. After we have the breakout session, about 10-15 minutes, I'll ask everybody to come back in, and we'll just kind of highlight the top 2 or 3 items that each group had discussed and what was kind of the most important or the highest areas of concern, so that we just all can we can have an idea as we walk out from this meeting tonight of what those are. What we will have at some point in the near future is we will record all of that information and make it available on the webpage. On the planning department's webpage. We'll also provide links to this PowerPoint as well as the streaming on BevCam. So the site we're talking about, and I think probably most everybody here understands what we're targeting, is this area on the bottom of the screen that's circled in the red dots, the red dash dots, starting on the west side, which is the former Ventron site. That's a vacant industrial piece of land, heading east along towards and just beyond the Jubilee Yacht Club. And we're really focusing south of Water Street. This is kind of our area of focus. I just wanted to point that out in case that wasn't understood. So kind of why are we here? And I think it's important for us, and it was important for me to understand moving into the city as the planning director, but I think it's important to inform this planning process to
why we're starting this now. And it goes actually back a little bit over a decade. In 2002, the city adopted a master plan, and then in 2003 there was a harbor management plan that was run primarily by the Beverly Harbor Management Authority. And in those plans, there were about 9 different objectives and goals that directed specifically to issues related to the harbor front, just the harbor front. We're not talking all of the city's waterfront, the harbor front down off Water Street. It was the redevelopment, or potential redevelopment, the potential access, the potential amenities that could be provided on the waterfront were, I would go as far as to say, a cornerstone of that master plan. So going back to 2002, this has been an issue that has been discussed. And I just kind of I would like to hit some of those specific recommendations that were mentioned in that master plan that really direct us to the DPA designation and a comprehensive zoning. So one of the more relevant is encourage commercial redevelopment of the waterfront that maximizes the economic potential of the parcels and creates a magnet for tourism and commercial activity. We had another goal and objective that states that the city should redevelop portions of the commercial waterfront for mixed residential, commercial, and recreational uses. And uses, really, the uses that are mentioned in this master plan that should be a focus or under consideration is mixed-use residential, hospitality, with first floor activities that promote public use, public activity, enliven a space, and require highly usable public access. And this is about making the waterfront accessible and an inviting space for everybody. And again, talking about what the mayor mentioned earlier, fishing from a recreational perspective, but also supporting commercial fishing generally. There was a specific recommendation, which I thought was interesting in this context, is that it says specifically to create a new and comprehensive waterfront zoning district in place of the WD and IG zoning district. So the WD is the Waterfront Development District, and the IG was formerly in General Industrial. Those 2 districts are exactly the area I just highlighted for you on that previous slide. So one of the specific recommendations is to do what we're doing today. And then lastly, there was a specific recommendation to actually remove the designated port area. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the major land use and development policy document for a community and for our city has many recommendations and goals that lead us to this point. There's been a number of other plans that have been developed since 2002. We have an open space plan. We have a downtown plan 2020 that was produced by Beverly Main Streets that both also address the harbor front. Open space plan talks more, as you might imagine, about access to open space and recreational amenities on the waterfront. The downtown 2020 plan really kind of gets at the fact it was done about 9 years later, 8 or 9 years later from the master plan, kind of pointing out that there hasn't been a lot of activity on the harbor front, talking about the opportunity to move forward projects there, and also linking the waterfront with downtown, both on Rantoul and Cabot. So there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of policy here that's moving us in this direction. There's been some false starts, I would say, to get us to a rezoning. We've made some attempts in the city that haven't gotten very far, and we think it's time to really to take a strong and aggressive and proactive approach to our waterfront. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the designated port area, and I think you can kind of see on this map, but I'll highlight it. The red line encircles or encompasses what is the designated port area. I'm just kind of trying to circle out with the laser. A designated port area includes waterside, so the shipping channel and basin for water-dependent uses, in this case the boats, the vessels, to be able to access the area and access the industrial uses that are on the land side. As the mayor pointed out in his introduction, I think we can show it here, this property right here is the city parcel that is the commercial wharf that has most of the commercial fishing, as I understand it, in this area, in this very area of the city, is actually outside of the designated port area. There is, as I understand it, some commercial fishing that happens along this pier and a little bit in Beverly Port Marina right here. But the overriding land use in the designated port area is a recreational boating marina. It's a full-service marina, but it primarily serves recreational boaters. There's a fairly large residential project with a small, relatively small recreational marina, and then the Jubilee Yacht Club. So talking about designated port areas, what's the intent? It's a state designation that was created in 1978. The idea was to protect coastal areas that provide characteristics that support marine industrial uses, shipping, large energy power plants that need to suck water out of the ocean for cooling purposes, boat building, commercial fishing is considered a industrial use. But in the 70s, we were seeing a lot of redevelopment and change in land use patterns along waterfronts that was taking these areas and turning them into residential or non-industrial uses. The state identified this as a concern in that the industrial uses provide an important economic development opportunity for the state, and that the idea was to conserve them. We hear a lot of conservation about land conservation, natural space conservation. This is conservation for industrial uses. So there's 13 of these areas set up across the state, and they were created in 1978. The waterside regulations were established in '79. I should just point out that it was 1987 or 86 when the landside regulations were put into place. That's probably that would explain why the Tux Point area went from a chemical storage area to a residential. The timing is everything, I guess. So as the mayor pointed out, we submitted a request to Coastal Zone Management, which is a division of the Department of Environmental Protection at the state, and they accepted our request to conduct a boundary review. That's the formal term. But as the mayor pointed out, it's our contention that the designated port area is not performing as it's intended under the statute. As I just pointed out to you, most of the uses in that DPA are non-industrial uses. They're not supported by the DPA. So what they're going to look at is they're going to look at all the parcels. They will look at them as a group because they understand that the grouping of parcels provide the characteristics that are needed to support industrial uses. But they're going to look at the area and they're going to say, does this still achieve the objectives of the port area? If it does, they will preserve it. If not, they will change it. It's a little simplified version of it, but that's in essence what they're going to be doing. The timeline is, right now, you can see in the 3 columns, we're in the middle column. It's called the consultation period. Many of you were at the first public meeting back in May. The public comment period ended in June 6th, and so that starts off this consultation period for 6 months. And what happens is Coastal Zone Management will work with the city, some other city officials, the Beverly Port Authority or Harbor Authority, and property owners. They're going to talk to every property owner of the DPA to understand what's going on as far as uses on those properties. And they're going to look at state licenses, waterways licenses, and building permits. They're going to really do a lot of research in that 6-month period to build the basis for the determination. After this 6-month period, which can be shorter, it's statutorily up to 6 months, they'll issue what's called a written designation report. That's the top right if you're following the diagram. They'll issue that report, and then there'll be another 30-day public comment period. At that point, there will also be a public hearing. So we'll make sure, if you've signed in, we'll make sure you all get an email and notification when that happens. But it'll be an opportunity to review and comment on their report. After that 30 days, they'll have up to 60 days to issue their final determination, and that's a final determination. There's no, once they make their determination, whether they move the boundaries or not, if they completely remove it, that's it. And we'll just have to go from there. But again, our expectation, based on the land uses that we see there, is that if not a complete removal of the DPA, there'll be a significant change to it. So that's the process, and as the mayor pointed out, that could lead us into February, March of 2015. But it was kind of funny when we were talking to coastal zone management. We asked them, so what's the process? And they said, well, it's 9 to 12 months typically, but it's a small DPA, so it could be 6 months. So I have no idea how long it's going to take. But we do expect it will be early 2015. So the zoning, comprehensive zoning process that we're kicking off tonight is in tandem with the DPA review, but it's not the same thing, nor is it linked in any way. The comprehensive zoning is a local ordinance that is created by the city and enforced by the city, and it gives us more control over what we want to do on our waterfront as a community and how that plays out in the long term, and what kind of development happens there and what kind of uses happen there. We're running the process concurrently so that we have a revised and comprehensive change to the zoning in place. Our goal is to have it in place before the DPA is changed, so that we can have our regulations that affect the vision, create the vision that we create together starting tonight in place once the DPA is changed. In case it takes us a little bit longer to do a comprehensive zoning amendment, we don't want to rush the process because we want to get it right, and we want to get it right the first time. We've proposed an interim planning overlay district, and I'll just in simple terms, it gives the city more control over land use and development regulation in the interim in case the designated port area is lifted and we haven't changed the zoning code yet. It just gives us more control over development. We can talk more about that if you like, but really I want to focus on the comprehensive zoning amendment because that's the end goal. Tonight's the kickoff meeting, and again, since we're running this in tandem, our goal is to have the zoning amendment drafted into the City Council early 2015. And I just want to run through a quick diagram here to give you a sense of what that process is going to look like. So if you look at the top left corner, the green squares are the areas at which there's going to be some opportunity for direct public comment and participation. So the kickoff meeting tonight, after this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to give us your thoughts and what you would like to see in the waterfront. Following tonight, in the months of July and August, the planning department is going to conduct a series of stakeholder meetings, and the mayor referenced this in the intro, with property owners, businesses. We'd like to talk with members of the fishing industry, business associations, neighborhood groups, on a more kind of one-to-one basis, and just have a more kind of intimate conversation to talk about, again, what do we want to see on the waterfront? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What are the ways that we can help improve access, improve economic development, improve quality of life? So we're going to take a lot of that information that we received, that public input. We're doing at the moment, and during that time, a lot of it, what we call existing conditions analysis. This is kind of planner terminology, but it's basically information gathering. Understanding what the infrastructure is understanding what's going on the water side, understanding current zoning and how that helps or hurts us, doing some precedent analysis from other waterfronts. So it's a way to kind of build some context into our zoning, so that once we get the feedback from the community, we can take that existing condition analysis, fuse it together into a framework plan. We're not going to create a master plan per se. It's going to be a framework plan that gives us the general outline and the general vision of what's going to happen, what people want to have on the waterfront, so that will inform us in developing the zoning regulations. So once we draft that framework plan, we're at the bottom left, well, that should take 3 months, 2 to 3 months. That'll get us into late September, October. We plan to have another public meeting. Well, we will be up here again presenting that plan to you, and we'll be talking a lot. We'll summarize the feedback that we've received in this meeting and the stakeholder meetings, how that's been incorporated into the framework plan, and then we'll have another conversation there and just give you a chance to react to that. Let us know what you think. Did we hit the values? Did we hit the concerns that were brought up tonight and during the stakeholder meetings? We will then take that information again, fold it into that draft, and rewrite it, and present to you again at the end of 2 months, again, approximately 2 months, so we're looking around December, what we believe will be a final plan that will develop the framework and guide us to developing the zoning code. We'll have a zoning code that we'll present to the planning board informally, and then if everything looks good, if we have a plan that people are happy with, in a zoning code that effectuates that plan, we'll then submit it. The planning department will submit it to the city council, who eventually has to take a vote to adopt that zoning ordinance. That's also, at that point, the reason that box is green is that the city council and the planning board typically hold, there's always a public hearing, but they typically hold joint hearings. So it's also another opportunity for the public to participate in that process. And then ultimately, the bottom right, 3 months from that stage, we'll have a new comprehensive zoning amendment. And that should get us into January, February of 2015. So that's the process. Now, I just want to do a little kind of a review of the area and kind of get us a little site context and set us up for the breakout sessions. So I suspect everybody knows the city very well. I'm sure you know it better than I do, but I just want to point out kind of the area that we're talking about, how it relates to the rest of at least particularly the downtown. So as you can see in the PowerPoint, I lost my laser. In the PowerPoint, the area in red is again the area that we're interested in. Top left, there's an orange circle. That's highlighting the train station, the depot train station. As the mayor pointed out, it's very close. Within at least a mile. It's very walkable to the site. The two arrows are Rantoul and Cabot, and then on the right, and then the circle is City Hall. So it gives you an idea of how proximate the waterfront is to the downtown and to the neighborhoods. I think, from my perspective, there seems to be a fundamental break between the harbor front and the neighborhoods and the rest of downtown. And one of the things that I would like to see as part of this conversation are ways to make better, more accessible connections between the waterfront and the neighborhoods, so that everybody can enjoy that in a better way, from a visual perspective, from an accessibility perspective, and then in terms of amenities and uses, so that we really can enliven it and enjoy it more broadly. Now I wanted to take a quick tour through time. So this is an aerial of the area in 1947. And I think this really demonstrates why the states thought this would be a good designated port area. So if you go east to west, on the left you have the Ventron site. It's an active industrial property. And you have the old bridge. And then just right of the bridge, or just east of the bridge, is coal storage. And that's about a third of the waterfront. In the middle, you have a small area where it looks like there may have been some commercial fishing that went on there. There's a handful of boats. And then where Tuck's Point is now, you'll see those are large chemical storage units. And then just on the corner, Jubilee Yacht Club. So a good 80% of the harbor front was incredibly industrial. That's 1947. 1965, we see things starting to change a little bit. Back where the coal storage was, just east of the bridge, you can see the McDonald's is now there. I've heard it's the first McDonald's in the state. I don't know if that's true, but there it is, 1965. The best McDonald's location ever. There's no question.
Was there before that?
Yeah, it might have been.
So to your right.
Is it to my right? Thank you. Here we go. This helps. All right. McDonald's. But you all knew that. This area around McDonald's is now, it's more of a recreational boating, and you can see some of the boat storage happening. But still, Ventron, whether it's active or not, is a major force just west of the bridge. And then you again, still chemical storage here. Things start to really change in 1987. Now you have Tuck's Point residential in place. So again, I mentioned in 86 is when the regulations for the DPA went into place for the land side. Tuck's Point must have happened in like 1985. So timing was perfect for them. So the chemical storage is gone. You can see Jubilee Yacht Club's getting a little bit bigger. Beverly Port Marina, or its predecessor, was in place here. Again, more recreational boating kind of activities. McDonald's in its heyday. And Ventron site is kind of the last vestige of a true industrial use. 2002, again, much on the east side of the bridge is the same. This is, and I just point this out again, this is the city dock that is commercial But for the most part, we have recreational boating going on over here, and the Ventron site's now vacant. So that's just, I thought that was a really helpful, for me it was very helpful to walk kind of through time to see what was going on the Beverly's waterfront, and might explain why the DPA was in place. The DPA was really in place because it was, at one point, an intensively industrialized space. It was coal and chemical storage. I don't think that's what anybody wants for the waterfront. Not that we even could go back to that place. So existing zoning. Everything east of the waterfront and south of Water Street, roughly, this kind of area that I'm highlighting, is the waterfront district, waterfront development district. This is a mixed-use zoning district that allows multifamily by right. It allows things like commercial fishing by right, home-based business, agriculture and horticulture is allowed by right. It's allowed, that particular is, I learned this recently, that particular use is allowed because it's exempted under state zoning. But the WD district also allows things like retail, restaurant, service businesses, indoor commercial activities like theaters are all allowed by special permit. But the residential is allowed by right, which I think is interesting, and one of those things that we see from a department's perspective is problematic going forward in terms of redeveloping the harborfront, because often multifamily only uses don't provide great access to the waterfront. They're not inviting for the public, generally speaking. East or west of the bridge is this relatively small district. It's the Waterfront Development Residential Zoning District. And it's in many ways very similar to the WD district, but it accentuates the residential component to a certain extent. It also requires much larger parcels. But it does allow commercial by special permit. Zoning also, just from a more general perspective, zoning does also set requirements in terms of dimensional, setbacks, height limits. 35 feet is the general height limit for both of these zoning districts. Actually, pardon me, WDR is 55. The WD, which is again to the east of the bridge, is 35 feet. And there's what's called floor area ratio, which is a density ratio for zoning. It's at 0.75. So just as an example, if you had a 10,000 square foot lot, that means you can build a 2,500 square foot building. So it's just a density ratio. That's in short what's allowed under current zoning. 25. Okay, I'm getting. This is not bad, actually. I think I can do this in 5 minutes. I wanted to go through existing land use. I know I've been doing this as we go along, but I thought it would be helpful to help inform our discussions going forward. And so I'll just go from left to right as we move across the screen. This property here, as we've been pointing out, is the Ventron site. It's a vacant property right now. But there are approvals. It has been approved for 72 residential units. At this point, I'm not aware of that project moving forward, but it has vested rights, the ability to build those 72 units, residential only. There is a fish market here with a relatively small pier where there is fishing that happens out of that. I believe it's a lobster boat. I don't know how many boats off the top of my head, but there is commercial fishing happening in this space between the bridge for the Route 1A and for MBTA. As has been mentioned, this is the city property where the commercial wharf is, where there's 26 spaces for 26 boats, and I understand there's 19 of those spaces are available for commercial boating uses. We keep things like the Harbor Master's boat there, there's the fire boat there, so there's 19 slips available for commercial use. And it's our intention to keep it that way. Right here's the McDonald's property. As you all know, it's vacant. Right now the Harbor Master has its offices there. This is the city's recreational dock. Beverly Port Marina generally stretches this whole area where it's a full-service marina and predominantly recreational. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. And I do know that there is a couple commercial fishing boats that run out of the Beverly Port Marina. There's also a sliver here where there's another dock owned by a different property owner that's primarily if not all, recreational use. And then there's also another separate owner that runs a dock here for commercial fishing, and I believe that's also primary lobstering. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong as well. This property right here is Tux Point. There's 106 residential condo units in that property. There's a pool there, and there's recreational boating happening there. There's recreational docks. The Jubilee Yacht Club is just east of that. Right here we have a small sewer pump station, and then a beach with a public launch. Just north of Water Street, just to hit that, there's Silver Court, which is predominantly residential. There is some land, boat storage, and a small commercial industrial building right next to that. So that's what's happening on our waterfront right now. So moving us into now that you know what's going on there, moving us into the kind of visioning in the breakout sessions, I think the mayor did a really nice job addressing this issue, but our guiding principle, that what's guiding our thoughts and our actions with this process is that we seek to protect the city's marine and waterfront resources while providing expanded public access by promoting new mixed-use development and waterside recreational facilities. That's kind of a vision statement, right? So that's what we want to do. There's a lot of different ways of doing that, so that's what we're here tonight to have you help us fill in the blanks and tell us what's the scale, what's the uses that get us to that point. But that's what we're trying to do. The placemaking elements, and the reason I say placemaking is what we want to do is we want to create a place that people are interested and invited and feel invited to go to and enjoy, whether that's for marine activities or go down and watch marine activities or go get a bite of food. There's some elements that are part of that we think are important and are worth thinking about as we have these conversations in the breakout sessions. Public access and connections to downtown are important. This is one thing I mentioned earlier. I really feel my sense is that the waterfront is broken and separated from the rest of the city. We want to find ways to make those connections explicit and make them attractive so that people can move in and out to the waterfront easily and enjoy it. Accommodate mixed-use development and recreational amenities to engender an inviting and active place. So a mix of that. How do we mix those two kinds of elements so that we have a very inviting place that people want to be at? Support commercial maritime activities. I know the mayor said it, but it's worth reiterating. We want to support the commercial fishing industry. We want to support it. We want to help grow it. Zoning is one way to do it. There's other methods that we'll need to look at and need to seek to implement. One of them is providing and maintaining a commercial pier that's available only to commercial vessels. But our underlying objective here is to preserve commercial fishing. Look to waterside recreation. That's also a great amenity for the waterfront and can mix well with some of these landside uses that we're talking about, the mixed uses, landside recreational opportunities. And we also see the waterfront as a great economic development opportunity for the community more broadly. As one of the objectives in the master plan mentioned, this could be a magnet for tourism. And so this could, one thing I always like to point out is that tourism helps provide amenities that residents can take advantage of. You go to a lot of other kind of seaside towns in Massachusetts or anywhere else in the country where there's a fair amount of tourism, a good amount of tourism. There's tons of restaurants, there's tons of shops, there's tons of places that would not otherwise be there if it wasn't for tourism. So there's a really good economic development opportunity here, generally. But all those different uses we've been talking about fit into that picture. So we're just about ready to break out. I'm almost done. Themes. I would like the breakout sessions to be conversations. Feel free to talk about whatever it is you want. What you'd like to see there. What are challenges that you see, concerns that you might have about redevelopment. Let's have a broad conversation. But some things that I think are really worth focusing on are public access and amenities. What are the desired land uses? What are the desired land use mixes for the waterfront and the scale of that? Okay, recreation, open space, both on the land side and on the water side. And then lastly, this is not an unimportant thing. I particularly feel that urban design and architecture are critical for places to be workable in an exciting place. So the kind of design amenities that are part of a public space and a part of buildings that will help make it a successful space. So that is all I have. I tried to rush through that and made it in 30 minutes. Is there any questions?
I'll stand up.
I was not part of the process that led up to the request for changing DPA. What has the DPA done? What effect has that had in Beverly since it was implemented?
Sure. The designated port area severely, I almost use it's a pretty strong word, but I would say actually severely limits the kinds of uses that are allowed in that district. It only allows industrial uses. And so things like a restaurant is not allowed. Things like retail, mixed-use retail is not allowed. In fact, recreational boating is not considered a marine industrial use. So it's very restrictive in what we can do. It restricts that, but it doesn't give the city any flexibility in finding ways to support the marine industrial uses that we feel are actually viable. The one viable marine industrial use that we see that exists is commercial fishing. And what we've seen, and I hope I was able to point out here, most of our commercial fishing happens outside of the DPA. So it's our opinion that the DPA doesn't preserve that use. We could do better under local rules and regulations and other programs to support our fishermen.
You should include the fact that you can look at where the DPA is and see that there are things in there that don't fit it. Well, they were there before it was instituted, so they're pre-existing. I just want to also acknowledge some of your elected officials are here. Councilor David Lang from Ward 1, Councilor Estelle Rand from Ward 2, Councilor Jim Latter from Ward 3, and Councilor Jason Silver, one of our large councilors. I don't think I've missed anybody, so thank you folks for joining us. And also former Councilor Pat Grimes, who was a Ward 6 and then an at-large councilor and did a lot of great work on development issues and planning issues for the city. So there you go.
Question over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you just discuss briefly how Chapter 91 fits into the puzzle?
All right, I'll repeat that. The question was, how does Chapter 91 fit in the puzzle? So for those who may not know, Chapter 91 is the waterways regulations that the state has in place. And generally speaking, this is very simplified, but generally speaking, the waterways regulations preserves public access to waterfronts, right? So it goes back to common law, back to like the 19th century, if not older, probably the 17th century. It preserves the public's right to go down and fish and fowl along, I think it's between the low and high water mark, right? So it preserves that right. This is actually a great question relative to the designated port area. The one place that is restricted is where a designated port area is put into place, because the state recognized that industrial uses and public access to the waterfront are a great mix. They don't go well together because of the nature of industrial uses. And so properties in a designated port area don't need to meet the strict guidelines of Chapter 91 in providing public access. So that is another benefit that we feel removing the DPA for the community will provide, is that will give us more control and more ability to require public access along the waterfront. One of our goals, and we didn't really talk about this because this doesn't necessarily apply to zoning, is that we would like to see a continuous walkway across that whole area we've been talking about. And in the future, finding ways to link that up to other waterfront areas. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So why don't I start here and move back? Go ahead.
How did the McDonald's get put there?
The McDonald's was there before the designated port area was in place. It was 1965-ish in the era you saw it was there. The DPA, the regulations were created in '78, and then the land side regulations part of the DPA were not put in place until '86. So it's basically an existing. Pardon me?
Wasn't it a DPA all that time? And you want to change it?
It was a DPA, but there weren't any regulations that prevented retail or restaurant uses.
So the DPA, there was a state law passed in 1978, and so prior to that, there was no DPA. Aaron gave you kind of a historic look of what had been going on down there, and just, you know, if it was at all confusing, when we're talking about rezoning, we're looking at kind of the whole of the waterfront from over by the Ventron on down past Tuck Point. The DPA doesn't include all of that. It's a smaller portion of it, right? You saw that difference? That make sense?
It does. The DPA area does include the McDonald's site, but McDonald's existed before the DPA, and because of that, it is in essence grandfathered. Like in zoning, it's an existing non-conforming use. And that's why it existed. In the back.
Couple of points. The master planning process in 2000, whenever it was, in discussing waterfront development, as I remember it, lumped the Bass River area in with the area that we're talking about. Hence, a very broad range of goals. And I think there have been some efforts by the past administration to try and unsuccessfully to implement some zoning focusing on the Bass River for residential and mixed use. Let's see. A bit of past history. As a result of the Tuck Point development, the current waterfront development zoning was created in an effort to try and prevent. The perception was that the Tuck Point blocked the neighborhoods in the city from any meaningful access to the water, especially visual. So the waterfront development zone that we have now attempted to establish view corridors and so on and so forth. My own opinion is it would fail if implemented, but to do that. But that's the genesis of the waterfront development zone.
So a couple quick follows up with that. So there was a Bass River study that was completed recently. We haven't really promulgated or started a zoning review of that. That may be coming down the pike, but we're not talking about Bass River. But I think the idea, though, is what we want to do more holistically is create better access to the waterfront for all of our waterfronts. We're in a unique situation in Beverly where we have oceanfront, we have a basin, harborfront, and we have the Bass River riverfront. And connecting those in some fashion, whether or not we can all connect them directly may be a challenge, but the idea is that we have a continuous connected access to the waterfront. But we'll be looking at that probably at another date. The one thing I would say about our current zoning relative to multifamily residential is I agree. Our current zoning does not, I believe, do the job in making sure that access for the public generally is well provided, nor does it create the environment where it's going to be an activated waterfront. Residential is not great for doing that. It allows residential by right, and there are, as you point out, some design guidelines, some design regulations that require corridors and access, but I think we can do better, and that's part of what we want to try to get to with this process.
Aaron, where over here?
I don't even know, that's okay.
Well, you do because they can't hear it on TV.
Oh, they can't do that.
There you go.
Really. So there are a couple things with Salem waterfront changing, with the stacks coming down and that power plant coming down. There's going to be a lot of activity there as well. Have you considered the impact of all of the new activity on what you hope to do, along with all of that, and what that, just the port in general, what that's going to bring, which is going to be a lot. They're going to bring in ships in Salem, much bigger ships, deep water stuff, and this will also create a whole lot more, not only a lot more activity, but there's waste management on that. What is that going to do to our water in general? There's also the sewage, also, Tuck's Point, when we're talking about cleaning up our area, Tux Point, is still really not cleaned up. There's still, a lot of things going on there, which, I hope you are doing something with that, Dan, getting that cleaned up. But the idea that this is going to create a whole lot of more business that you're talking about, what are you going to do with, streets, noise, things like that? You're talking about changing the shape of probably one of the oldest communities in Beverly. And how is that going to affect all of that? I'm sure you've thought about it.
So those are all great points, and I would love to delve into those at the breakout sessions. That's exactly the kind of things that we want to talk about. You're right, we've thought about it, but we haven't started the process of creating the regulations or creating the overriding vision that will protect the neighborhoods. Because I think what you're getting at is, how is development on the waterfront? Have you thought about the impacts in the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it? Yeah, but we haven't really had that conversation fully, and that's what we want to do tonight. So let's bring that into the breakout session.
Eric, this mic is live here, so if people want to speak at the podium, they can do that too.
After this person, let's do it.
Along with what Pat was saying, I live in the neighborhood right there on Front Street, and it's very congested as it is. And like over in Salem, like around the Willows and those neighborhoods, they all have resident sticker parking only. So will the city protect the parking in the neighborhood so that tourism coming in won't be spilling into the neighborhoods, so that we will have places to park?
Another great point, and something that we please bring into the breakout session. You mentioned at least one solution, resident parking, which I think is a great way of dealing with that. Zoning also should require parking to serve the uses that are down there, so people who are coming down would have parking. So there's a couple of different ways of dealing with that, but that's certainly an issue that we want to talk about more. Absolutely.
Why don't we have people go to the microphone? That's a good idea.
And why don't I also suggest
When do we need to get to the breakouts?
What time is it now? 7:30. We've got about 10, 15 minutes, I think. But
another 10 minutes of Q&A, then we'll go into the breakout.
Can I just also suggest, if you have particular questions about impacts, opportunities, land uses, what's going on in Salem, these are great conversations for the breakout sessions. So let's save it for that, and we can really dive into those questions. If it's more general about the process and the DPA, what is zoning, now's a great time to do that. So go ahead.
So if the DPA were to be de-designated, that can never be reenacted, right? So once it's gone, correct?
Actually, there's a process that you could request designation through the coastal zone management. Okay. Once again, my sense, though, is if it's de-designated, they're not going to be interested in looking at it.
Right. So if we were to de-designate, what can't we do without that DPA? Does it prevent us from doing anything we wouldn't normally be able to do?
No.
Okay.
No, the DPA doesn't provide us with any benefits. What the benefit is that it conserves land for industrial use only.
Right.
And that's not benefiting the city.
Okay, great. That's all I want to know.
Thank you.
Can you tell me anything more about the status of the boat ramp? My understanding is that it's owned by the state but maintained by the city. And am I wrong about that? And would that change with the change that you're talking about?
Are you talking about the boat ramp at the end of Water Street?
Yes.
I don't actually know who owns it and who maintains it. I can find out for you.
Okay.
This process won't change the status of it. This process is really focusing on the zoning aspects of it. But if the issue is it's not providing adequate access for recreational boating, then I think the recommendation out of this plan will be to make improvements so that people actually can use it if that's the problem.
And
it's public ramp with private property on both sides. Either side.
So you have to be very careful how you back up your boat.
I'm aware. And my other question is, in your themes that you're, considering, I didn't see anything about the changing environment. Like it or not, the sea levels are rising, and you're talking about putting a lot of building and planning down there, and how are you going to protect for the future when that happens?
Great point. Let's talk about that. Absolutely. That needs to be a part of the conversation. It needs to be part of our regulations so that what's being built down there is not going to flood out every other week. That's a great point. Thank you.
I just wanted to make some comments that you forgot to say that there's a public park at the ferry landing, the public landing,
Right.
between McDonald's and the commercial fishing area. And then you also forgot to say that there are public walkways along Port Marina, except where they have the davit and where it's dangerous. And there are public walkways along Tuck Point. In fact, in the past, they've had the Spirit of Massachusetts there, and the public were able to go during homecoming time. They were able to take boat rides on the Spirit of Massachusetts, which was docked at Tuck Point, and also the Nantucket Lightship was docked at one time at Tuck Point, and the public has access. You can walk down along the waterfront, along where Tuck Point is. And when they did build Tuck Point, they took a city street, Maple Street, which we lost. Also, there are two designations right now, zoning designations. West of the railroad tracks to the end of Congress Street is Waterfront Development Residential, WDR. And then east of the railroad tracks, going all the way to Sandy Point, I guess, is Waterfront Development, WD. And that's it. Thanks.
That's absolutely right. Correct. Sorry to make that clear.
We could other people fill.
Yeah, just a big picture question. I don't. So if you look at this picture, you've got waterfront access for what, maybe 100 recreational vessels there. You got another 200 from Jubilee. I just don't understand what you want this to look like when this process is done. So you've got, as the lady just mentioned, you have a waterfront goes all the way to most of the way past Tuck Point, and then you have private property at Tuck Point, private property at Jubilee. So what's the vision? Is the vision that all of this marina disappears and you replace it with restaurants and ice cream stands, or what exactly is?
No, absolutely not. No, as we pointed out in the guiding principles to preserve the maritime uses, all the docks that you're talking about are on the water side. Those don't need to move. Those can stay. In fact, as the mayor pointed out, we're looking for ways to increase those, so there's more access to the water. There's also, as you probably know, a number of moorings that are accessed from multiple areas on the harbor front. What we're looking at, even though there's a lot of private development, zoning affects uses on private property. And so what we want to do is create a zoning code that encourages property owners to use it in a way that will provide an active, inviting space that doesn't have to impact the waterside recreational uses. It doesn't have to impact the operational portions of the marinas so that people can get their boats into the water. It would be a mix of both. There could be some retail, there could be some residential. It would be a mix, though, so that you could continue to use it as a boating center. That's at the core of what we're talking about. So that's the vision. A recreational and commercial waterfront that people can enjoy, that has public access along the entire length, not just Tuck's Point, not just a small portion of Beverly Port Marina and the city. The entire length of it, people have access to, and to continue those boating, recreational, and commercial sides of the coin.
So the zoning will change. I mean, all those boating people, there's security issues, security access to all the piers, for example. There's security issues at Jubilee as well, and unless I guess you can't. You're not talking about expropriating land, so to make people put in that walkway. So I don't know how else you do it across private walkways. There's what you're not showing in this picture, of course, is the whole expanse, the next mile down to the right here, which is Independence Park and Dane Street Beach and all the walkways along there. So there's a lot of public access that way. I don't understand are you expecting people to build restaurants along Water Street, but there's no land there, actually, there's a
Yeah,
road.
this would be a good breakout session conversation. Basically,
So what, you're going to expropriate they are going to develop. So you're going to try and encouraging Port Marina to develop it into a waterfront.
or whoever the property owner is. For example, just a quick example,
Okay.
the Ventron site, right, where there's going to be, or there's approved 72 residential multifamily project. They're required under Chapter 91 license, as was talked about earlier, they're required to provide, as a part of that project, a 10-foot wide public walkway.
As part of their new development.
As a part of the development,
I mean,
on
but
private
clearly,
property.
on that site, there's new regulations will, you can do what you want in terms of requiring this and that in order to get the permit. On the existing property, it's more difficult. But, okay, anyway, thank you.
Hang on. Yes.
I just wanted to make a brief clarification. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron. I believe that essentially the designated port status trumped the WD zoning. Therefore, nothing has happened with it. Therefore, we haven't had to deal with it, good or bad. Once that is lifted, the zoning that is enacted will govern what happens, and it underscores that that has to be extremely carefully crafted in order to accomplish whatever it is we want to do.
Correct and correct.
The McDonald's building and the property there, that was purchased for park and recreation purposes. Will that also to include, with the Piers Act, that was taken through eminent domain to basically build a public pier and for other public purposes. Will those areas be protected to be used by the citizens of Beverly 24 hours a day to access their boats and to fish?
Yeah, what we're talking about is public access and making sure it's available to everybody. So,
24 hours a day? No.
well,
You want us to say,
You want me to say here and now that there will be 24-hour access to this piece of land or that piece of land? Let's do this, Rick. As Aaron said, that's a great conversation to be had around the table in a breakout group. What we're looking at is we're looking at an area of land where the public access has been insufficient for a long, long time. Okay, so you can say that there's public access across the Port Marine property, but it's chopped up, interrupted, and not really that effective. There's the public's ability to enjoy the waterfront now it's good, it's okay, but it's limited to the public property at the old McDonald's building and over towards the bridge. Okay? The idea of lifting the DPA, which stands in the way of the utilization of Chapter 91 to get the public more access to the waterfront, that's what we're trying to achieve by lifting the DPA. We need to rezone because the zoning that exists down there is not consistent with the city's master plan, or once we sit and really kind of dive into it together, what I think we'll all agree it needs to be. Now, this process is not designed to get a consensus of 40,000 citizens that, or even the folks in this room, that everybody's going to agree on every point of what this zoning ordinance will look like. Our hope is that if we sit and have the conversation, we can debate it and discuss it. I just think we have a better forum for it by, in the next 5 minutes, getting into four smaller breakout groups and having the conversations, reporting back, moving forward from tonight with smaller group meetings with stakeholders. And so I think we can move towards a rezoning that, by and large, people can get behind and can support. And you may end up liking some of it very much and being less excited about other parts, but we want to make sure that whatever your interest, priorities, and concerns are, that they're factored into it all. Okay? When we do get into the breakout groups, we want to hear who you think are the stakeholder groups who need to be at the table. Clearly, it's the neighborhoods. It's the commercial fishermen. It's the property owners down on the waterfront. It's the Harbor Management Authority. It's the planning board. It's any number of groups of people. And so, weigh in on that as we're sitting down in these breakout groups as well. I think we probably ought to go to the breakouts. And then, what is your plan, Aaron? Breakouts for how? Why don't I give it back to you and you can.
Sure. So we've got 4 spaces, the 2 meeting rooms behind us here, and then we'll have 2 spaces where people can break out. What I'd like to do is take 10, 15 minutes. I think there's a lot to talk about, clearly. I want to give everybody an opportunity to really have a good conversation. And again, really big picture kind of thoughts, and then break into some of these themes and new themes. The one about the environment and climate change is a critical point. So anything that we missed, please bring it up. So if we could break out. The one thing I would ask is, we always have better conversations. We get more profound output if we break people up. If you're in a group with people you don't know. So if you don't mind, instead of don't go to a room with all your friends. If you could break up and split up, that would be much appreciated.
Which group is going where?
You could choose. You could choose. All right. I'll tell you what. Here's. We'll do it this way. This reminds me of grade school, but we'll do it because I think it works. Why don't you count off 1, 2, 3, 4 in your row, and if you're a 1, go to that room, which is conference room B.
So they're not topical.
They're not topical. No, we're gonna talk. Everybody gets an opportunity to talk about whatever they want to talk about. All right. So, ready? If you're a 1, go back to conference room A. If you're a 2, conference room B. If you're a 3, over here with the cookies. I don't want anybody faking the 3. And then 4 is on the other side.
the day I was born, said my father, said he, of an elegant legacy waiting for thee. 'Tis a rhyme for your lips and a song for your heart, to sing it whenever the world falls apart. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow it over the hills and the stream. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow the fellow who follows a dream. So I bundled my heart and I roamed the world free, to the east with the lark, to the west with the sea. And I've searched all the earth and I scanned all the skies, but I found it all at last in my own true love's eyes. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow it over the hills and the stream. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow the fellow who follows a dream.
Excuse me, everybody. Excuse me. Excuse me. Everybody. Hello. Excuse me. Can we sit down for a second? I would like to wrap up. Everybody can sit down for a sec. We got 5 minutes. Okay. All right, just a couple more minutes, everybody. Thank you for your patience, and we'll wrap this up for tonight. Could I have the speaker for group number 1 come up? We got one. You'll be next. All right. You go ahead. All right. Let's get it. If everybody could be quiet for a moment, we're going to start reporting back on what we talked about.
Yeah, he's ready to go. We're going to try to wrap this up by reporting back and just giving you a couple last details.
All right, thank you. So that's how you do it. You clap. All right, so we'll just go through quickly, please, to talk about kind of the highlights, the top maybe 3, maybe 4, if you had trouble, of the points that were discussed during the breakout session, so we all can kind of hear it collectively.
So not each category.
You can just top 3 or 4, please. I don't want to go through everything.
Okay. Zoning that allows property owners to realize profit while being inclusive, promoting comprehensive planning that provides an opportunity for general citizens to have public access, architectural continuity, and parking and safety.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next, group 2. Group 2. You're close. Why do you go? All right, Amy, you go ahead.
I think one of the biggest themes that came out was scale of development in terms of, there's large parcels that are privately owned that, may not be open for future development anytime soon, and then smaller parcels that, how are we going to fit a restaurant or any kind of other commercial or residential development on a smaller parcel. So scale was important in terms also of, fitting into the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. Parking and traffic was another theme that bubbled up that was a very big concern. Ideas around that, some suggested perhaps a shuttle to move people back and forth, a parking area that's removed off site and then, shuttling people back and forth. And perhaps residential sticker parking to preserve what exists for the neighborhoods. Other themes that I think are important to talk about, there was ideas around honoring the historic character of that area and perhaps opportunities for marine education. And then looking at development from a full year perspective as opposed to just a seasonality thing where we're thinking boating and fishing or the recreational part of it. Let's really think 12 months a year as opposed to 3 or 4. And then another theme came through that, people would really want it to be a destination, like a showcase, a gateway to the rest of Beverly and beautifying for that. So hopefully I hit everyone.
Great, thank you. Next.
Okay. We had 3 and then a little bit of spillover that I'll say. Public access was really strong priority with everyone, in particular that we make sure we maximize the existing public access and what's the effective public access, what's really used, that it be continuous, connected to the downtown, comprehensive, perhaps drawing people from Salem, from the part that actually is well connected to us. So that was one. theme. A second one was mixed use. There was some discussion of how much of that should be residential, ranging from, I think, views ranging from none to an appropriate amount. How much residential do you need to support commercial development? Definitely some commercial development, and encouraging the use of the water, particularly by people-powered vehicles, kayaking, paddle boats, that type of use. There was, again, a sort of reiterated desire for green space and food and drink, not necessarily as one sit-down restaurant, but some combination of those things, and a lot of discussion of how we'll work that out with the existing property owners, and again, understanding that this is just a vision and maybe some of it's not feasible. And the last one I'll say, which was, I don't know if it was a consensus, but it was a little different and did get said, and there were some nods to it anyway, was something that would take advantage of our arts connection. Now we're going to have this arts district, that we have an arts college, that we have colleges here, something that would draw all that together, and possibly some kind of educational or either Beverly's history or in some way a welcoming non-commercial entity, and that would also be year-round. So,
Great, thank you.
Did I miss any?
And last but not least, Rob, thank you.
Our concerns were based on a lot to do with commercial fishing in the Goat Hill area, with fishing being squeezed out with this whole thing. Of course, the parking and the problems that would exist. Work zone for the fishermen, so to unload and load their baits, and to create a area where they cleaner with public bathrooms and bait coolers to keep the bait off the docks, lower the smell of the area, walkway, and a mixed use for the Ventron site. One of the things was whether the city could purchase it or not, and they were concerned about building height restrictions as well for all of the waterfront.
So thank you, everybody. I think some very common themes there, and I think very thoughtful discussions. I appreciate the time. Over 2 hours now, just barely. What we'll do is that the next step for staff is to take everything that was talked about, compile it, put it together. What we'll do absolutely for the next draft plan that we present in the late September, October timeframe is we'll have that for you. We'll have that just inventoried out. I can't promise it will be soon, but what I'd like to also do is make it available on our webpage. It'll be a very simple bullet list, but all the comments and the general themes that came out, so you can take the time and look at it. And I can tell you, we'll absolutely take the feedback that we received tonight and fold that into what we developed for zoning code. I think I can say, I'm confident that I can say the concerns, the opportunities that were raised can be addressed through a thoughtfully drafted zoning code, and I appreciate your input. And I also can tell you that I couldn't have, nor could have staff thought of everything. So your input here is very carefully considered and appreciated. So I'm going to let the mayor walk us out.
Thank you, Aaron, very much. Well, a couple thoughts. Thank you all. Just as particularly the breakout sessions were happening, I was reminded that democracy is not easy, and it can be challenging to kind of to work through issues where people have concerns, about how it might go. And there was a lot of spirit, which was great. I think for the most part, people were able to respectfully kind of work through some of the issues that were raised. But it's a great starting point. We're trying to get this right, and our waterfront has been for many, many years just what it is. It hasn't been all that it can be for our city. For those of you who like what you're able to do on the waterfront currently and want to make sure that's preserved, make sure we continue to hear that. And we want to make sure we work that in. For those of you living nearby, who want to make sure that your enjoyment, of your own homes and your own neighborhoods continues to be what you know it to be, make sure that you're part of this conversation. And anybody from anywhere in the city who wants to, who has a vision for the waterfront or has a sense of wanting to utilize it more, enjoy it more, make sure that you weigh in. If there's anybody here who thinks that you are a stakeholder group of one, give us a call. We can sit down. If I do mean that seriously. If you want to come in and talk with us one-on-one, we can do that. If you share concerns with neighbors, family members, friends, make sure that collectively you come in and sit with us. And as Aaron laid out, we'll be working through this over the next 3 months or so, throughout the summer, and meeting with as many of you as want, and trying to work through the issues both raised tonight and others as they come up, so that we can put something in draft form back in front of you and other folks who want to be part of the conversation. What did we say, by the end of September? Looking at?
Early October.
So, okay. So again, thank you all so very much for taking the time to be here tonight, and I hope you have a good evening and a good weekend. And a good 4th, which is coming up soon. Thanks.